right, welcome back to Beyond the Court with League One Volleyball, where we deep dive with some of the top coaches and leaders in volleyball and beyond. I'm your host, Courtney Thompson, and we all know a great coach will challenge their athletes to find their best in every area of their game, while also helping to inspire and motivate them in ways that go far beyond the court. Today, I am joined by my very own brother, who has done some amazing things in this world. And of course, I'm biased, but along with my oldest brother, Craig, is one of my favorite humans. Trevor was the top graduate and captain of the baseball team at the Naval Academy. He went on to attend Oxford University on a Rhodes Scholarship before jumping back into the Navy for 14 years, where he served as a SEAL officer in a wide range of leadership positions around the globe. He currently works as the global head of growth for Scale AI, a company accelerating some of the most ambitious AI applications in the world. He's married to Katie, who we all like a little bit more than him, and he has 3 beautiful children that he coaches in T-ball. Trevor, I am so excited for this conversation around leadership and your time as a Navy SEAL. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, right back at you. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks.
So to start off, can you just share where you are in the world and how you're doing?
I am in my working from home office in Issaquah, Washington, outside Seattle. More broadly, I am working for a company called Scale AI. So Scale is it's an AI company that's sort of the foundation underneath a lot of what you see now with these large language models, ChatGPT and other things. But it's essentially a data company that's building generative AI around the world. And it's a relatively new job. I've been there for a few months and it's incredible so far.
So cool. And can you share in your words a little bit about your background, how you got into this?
Where do I start? So we grew up together as siblings in Washington. I think we left for college, or I guess you stayed close, but I left for college with the intention of serving in the military and then really coming back to where we grew up. And so that's what I've done. I spent about 18 years away, if you count college. And then I did 14 years in the SEAL teams, where I, spent time, really most of it abroad, kind of all different places in the world in a pretty wide variety of missions. At the time, so special operations is unique in that there is you have a lot of options for what you can do, is one way to put it. You're trained for a certain set of skills, but generally you walk into fairly ambiguous situations and just kind of have to figure it out. And so that was really the routine for 14 years. Where it would be, new mission, a new set of kind of goals, a new team, and then you work with that team, you grow and you figure and you go try to execute on that mission. And then generally speaking, in your next role, you have a very different set of tasks. So It ranged everything from kind of intel gathering type of operations to ones that were more advise and assist and actually kind of bled more into humanitarian type work, to what you see on TV, kind of the much more traditional Navy SEAL operations. So I left that once I started having children. So I have 3 kids now, and I did one deployment with a little baby girl, and it was overall a pretty tough experience, and a real appreciation for the difference of deploying when you're a solo single person to when you have a family that you're accountable for. So. Anyway, but once we started having kids, we just made the decision to kind of wrap up my military career and then move back home to Seattle. So when I did that, I met a pretty incredible person who had founded a couple companies, a guy named Brent Fry, and sort of an icon in Seattle, a well-respected leader and just well-respected overall person. And he had very recently started a company doing AI applications of computer vision in agriculture. And so he was looking for somebody to really help grow the company. It was brand new and they had a lot of really strong, really, really good experience and talent, but they needed somebody to kind of help organize all of that and grow it. And so I took on a role as president of that company and did that for a little over 5 years. And then just a few months ago, sort of met the CEO of Scale. He said, "Hey, we've got this incredible business. It's growing really fast. And right now, as fast as AI is expanding, we see this huge opportunity globally. And there's really, the time is now to go get that." And so he, with a lot more detail, sort of said, "I need you to come in and help figure out what that strategy looks like." And so building on a lot of the great work the company's done, it's like the perfect role for me because it's sort of, it's very entrepreneurial. It's very startup-y. with the foundation and credibility of a company that's built incredible products and tools. But it's back to that world that I love so much in the military, which was, you're planted into sort of a new arena with a really talented team, and you've got to go figure out like where to put your energy. So it's awesome.
I'm so excited for you. I know it hits on so many notes of, I think, you at your essence and where your strengths are. And that's always a good thing. So it's kind of fun because you were 2.5 years older than me. So you were in the SEAL teams when I started on the national team. And we kind of, for me, there was so much meaning because of our grandparents, because of dad and our uncles and cousins who were all in this military. For me to get to say, well, I'm not doing that, but now I have an opportunity to represent all the good that you guys are fighting for and wear a flag on my chest, obviously just keeping a ball off the ground, slightly different. But it was a really cool, 10, 15 years where we were kind of living relatively parallel lives. That's not true. I'm going to say that again.
No, I think it is.
Okay.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Just this experience of being overseas and kind of...
there's a ton of parallels.
Yeah. Pursuing something that was like deeply meaningful and bigger than us. But I want to connect our worlds. And I don't know if you remember this story as intensely as I do, but I was very lucky. I competed in London and Rio Olympic Games. And in London, our whole family was there. It was amazing. The pictures are insane. So cool to have you guys. And then in Rio, Zika was happening. So Katie didn't come. Stacy didn't come, but you were going to come to Rio. And you were also on call with the SEAL teams, but you got a special exemption to come down to the games. And I remember it was the day before I was flying down there, you called me and you couldn't tell me what was happening, but you just said, hey, I can't tell you what we're doing, but I get to go to my Olympics now. And it's like the coolest thing we've ever got to do. And I won't be able to watch you. And I remember being sad and just so stoked about it. And then I think you have a pretty cool story about when you guys got to where you were. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So to your first point on the parallels, I think it's worth just going into a little bit because I do think there's a ton of similarities between what you were going through in your life and what I was. So I was, call it 2006 and 2007, was going through basic SEAL training, which is people like I think learning about it and hearing about it because it's similar to sports in that it's sort of a controlled environment where you get to, it's like a laboratory for people, right? It's the same setting over and over. You throw in different types of people, different sets of leaders, and different things happen. But the routine is the same, and it's been the same for a very long time. And it's really hard. And so when you do that, it sort of becomes this fascination that everybody wants to know, how do people respond? And one of the things that you learn as you do in sports is that things like leadership, which can be kind of these murky topics, they're real. They have a major actual impact. You could take, this is sort of a common story, but it's really true. I saw it all the time where you'd have two boats and it's six guys under boats and they're racing and it's miserable and you're cold and wet and sandy. And one boat's winning over and over again. And then the boat that loses gets punished. And so just the delta between the two gets worse. And then they'll swap the leaders and the boat that's been losing will win. And it doesn't make any sense because the talent is different. And, so it's just, but at that point, you sort of go from believing that leadership is, you go from thinking it is this thing, it's real, but then really, really trusting that stuff matters a lot. So the parallel being you're going through the gauntlet of, at that time, you're, trying to win a national championship and succeeding, but then also transitioning to a totally new environment, just like I did when I graduated. I go to a team and it's a bunch of guys, you're a bunch of women, and now you're trying to make this new team and sort of establish yourself in this new environment. So I don't know. I think it is something that I really held sacred through that period, that we got to always kind of bounce off of each other, those ideas and the successes and failures. So the experience in the Olympics was just that. I was very excited to go. And obviously we got called to do a mission that I was quite exciting, and sort of we're on standby and, you're like, oh, here we go. But everybody's obviously very excited. And that's sort of what we're there for. And so, so we were deployed and I couldn't tell Katie where I was going. I couldn't tell you or anybody.
Katie's his wife.
But Katie's my wife. But when we got there, we had TV. And so we had this fun routine where we didn't have a lot of other stuff to do other than the job. But when we had downtime, I'd find myself with like 25 guys all watching your games, hoping you'd get in. And then when you did, like losing your mind, losing our minds. It was really incredible. So yeah, it's pretty special. I think also, we had some people that I knew that were down there kind of working on some security stuff, and they checked on Courtney and were giving me regular updates. And one of the funny stories was they were trying to be real sneaky, and I think they gave you something like a device or something so they could kind of track where you were.
Yeah.
It was like
they give you a satellite phone.
It was a satellite phone. So
it was huge. And they're like, if anything goes down, keep this in your bag. I was like, geez, what's going down here? Yeah. I didn't even know SEALs went to the games.
But nice that they were all looking out for you.
So one of the things, I don't know, I feel really lucky to get to know you in the way that I do and all of these moments growing up. And then, you have all these external successes. And I think where we're a little bit similar is that on paper, it's like, wow, they've done some really cool things in the world. And yet you and I feel like our experience is like, we just got our ass kicked over and over. And yet there was this like deep sense of dreaming. And, when I think of you, I think of work ethic, this like just doggedness to like, I want this so badly, I'm going to figure it out. And it's worth it to try everything I can. But I remember the way that you used to talk about like when you went to get a Rhodes Scholarship. And in that process, you would tell me, can you imagine being in that room? Like what it would feel like to walk in your suit with this group and get to have these conversations. And then before you were on the SEAL team, I remember visiting you in San Diego and you were like, do you want to go to the beach and we'll like get in the water, we'll get sandy, like pretend, this is what it feels like. And so in a way you were like tapping into visualization, motivating yourself in this way. But I just want to hear like what actually motivated you?
I think you can sort of like this answer can sort of land at a ton of different levels. So I don't know what my answer is when I go to like the deepest level. I think the first time that I was aware of having like a high degree of motivation, was I think an awareness, early conversations with mom and dad around, life being relatively easy for us, right? Mm-hmm. We had just like loving parents. Yeah. They helped us dream big. I remember telling mom that I wanted to be I want to go to Stanford and get a scholarship and play baseball, basketball, and football. And then I would graduate and go play for the Sonics, the Mariners, and the Seahawks. And I remember mom and dad like helped me work through the schedule. And I was like, I'm going to miss the first few games of the basketball season, but like, it's worth it because we'll be in the playoffs. And they like pretended that was normal. And so
I've never heard that story. That's amazing.
Yeah, I remember it like yesterday. But the idea was like I was able to have these huge dreams, and then that motivates me to go like practice these things. And I achieved almost none of my early dreams, but I do think I built this habit of dreaming really big and then like running towards that thing until it's not really possible anymore. So I think early on, back to my answer, I think realizing that like we were in a fortunate position to sort of drive positive impact in the world. And I just remember that like awareness and feeling like I had an advantage that I couldn't waste. And I think that's always fueled me in some way. And that, it's not all been about like impact. I think there's in reality, like I like accomplishments and prestige, and like we all kind of have those things, but at its core, it is like being a really positive force in the world because I was given like a big opportunity to do that.
It's so interesting hearing you talk about that because it's, again, I feel so lucky that I got to see how you were moving through things and then, oh, this is what we do. And I remember telling mom and dad, I think I was the only girl in Little League, right? And and I remember wanting to play for the Seattle Mariners. And also they're like, yeah, of course you can do this. Like, why not? And I think that coupled with like I remember dad driving us to Little League or even waking us up in the morning. Remember, he'd be like opening the blinds. There's like the smell of pancakes and bacon and he'd start singing, "It's a great day for a baseball game." And we're like, oh God, dad, but like an enjoyment of the little moments in the process while also dreaming big, I think mom and dad did that incredibly well.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's also, I think there's a degree of framing of competitiveness that was positive. Like this is one of the things that's always resonated with Pete Carroll is a lot of people do view competitiveness as a bad thing. Like it's certainly a bad thing in business. It can be a bad thing interpersonally if kids let it get out of control or adults. But like I always had a really positive framing of this because it meant like I think I was always competitive with you And because I was older and maybe a little more talented, like I just won a lot against you.
Stupid.
Just kidding. But I do think it motivated you. I remember watching the Pete Maravich movie, and we were both watching it on a rainy day on a Saturday. And we get like 45 minutes in, and I'm like thinking I might go get like a glass of milk. And I come back and you're outside shooting, and you like missed the whole second half of the movie because you were like so excited to go get better at basketball. Just like, dang, she's like a little bit different. But I do think that like the fact that we had kind of a very positive competitiveness within our family and with our friends and stuff, I think that made a big difference too.
We won't bring up our pickleball game last weekend. Didn't end well for me. When I think of competing in these moments of working towards something that you find meaningful, you got to be resilient and tough. We've all heard these things, but as you said, people like hearing about Navy SEALs. They like hearing about Hell Week. And Craig and I got to be there for you after Hell Week, and I've never seen you ever be more delusional. Like you couldn't even order breakfast. You were like swaying at breakfast, and then you were like, I'll take the pancakes and the oatmeal. And like you just kept ordering. We're like, all right, well, we got this part. But what did you learn about toughness through maybe that experience? Because it kind of highlights that. And also, how would you teach this to a young person? I know your kids are in T-ball, you're coaching them now, but like, how do you translate your experience to bringing someone else along?
I think toughness toughness or resilient are they're different words, but they're pretty overlapping. Mm-hmm. And I guess let me answer the resilience piece. I think the resilience piece is having like a very clear, repeatable source of motivation or end state or something like that. It's like clarity around what you're doing allows you to be incredibly resilient, right?
Like tapping into purpose.
Yeah, tapping into purpose. Exactly. And so, it's positive purpose, it's negative purpose. So if I'm just being really honest about buds, like the things that motivated me were I had built an identity around the guy who was pursuing this thing. And the idea of me not succeeding at that and having to like face that was very like significant for me. And so that was like when I would hit like a bad spot, I would have that thought and be like, oh yeah, I gotta go do this thing. So that was quite motivating. It was also like, there's also the positive vision of who I could become, what I want to do with my life and my career and the things that this would unlock. But those were like very tangible, specific images for me. And they were, mantras and things like that, because we get distracted and all this, but having those go-tos every time, like I had the same 3 thoughts through buds all the time. That sort of when I would hit those lulls where I would struggle or I'd get, think I was not doing very well, like it would just allow me to kind of push.
What were the 3? You remember?
Well, the first was the total fear of like having to go talk to all the people who had like, there was this, when I was at graduate school right before that, there was this sort of rumor at the end that like I was a SEAL from people that I didn't really know. And I remember hearing that and it was like, that's like your worst nightmare to ever have somebody say that when you're not. It was just like, I never said that. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
And it was awful, but I remember thinking like, well, I guess I better go do it. Like now I'm going to have to go tell this. So I thought about that all the time. I thought of my family a lot, in that like the excitement around being able to, I have a lot of respect for our family, obviously. But people that you respect, like wanting to tell them that you did this thing that you aspired to do was an image that I thought about all the time, whether it was like, our grandfather or dad or mom or you guys, that really went a long way. And then I think the third one was kind of more like, team oriented. It was just sort of this mantra that I used around being able to get out of your own way and just like think about helping other people. And of all the things that I learned in buds about being quote unquote tough, like that was the most impactful. Like my position early on was I was just one of the guys, and we would go sit in the water for 45 minutes and it's freezing and you're like almost hypothermic. And it was hard. But then once a couple guys got dropped from the class. And so I pushed into a leadership position. And now like I'm spending the whole time like counting guys and seeing who's going to have hypothermia and if our numbers are wrong, because our class will get in trouble if I don't do those things right. And then like the 45 minutes flew by. It was this weird, oh my gosh, you can actually direct your attention deliberately and then reduce the amount of pain that you're feeling. That was pretty profound for me.
Wild.
And I think most, like you've probably figured that out a long time ago. Most athletes figure out how to disassociate when it comes to uncomfortable situations. But like that was like evidence again that I could do that. So the second part of your question.
Wait, before you get to that, how you translate it to youth athletes, I've never heard you talk about this, and it's so weird because I kid you not, on the national team, I would toggle between calling you and grandpa, especially just because of the military and like our family and all of that, of like, you guys, I get to represent our family in this country in the Olympics. How cool is that as a female professional athlete? And then I would imagine on the reverse, calling my best friend from elementary school, Alan Thiesenwitz, and telling him that I got cut. And I was like, I cannot do that. Like, that can't happen. That's so wild that was also like part of your framework.
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
One of the
crazy.
things that this is a way non sequitur, but one of the things, like as I've gotten older, I've spent more time like with Asian cultures.
Mhm.
And one of the things that American culture is very much like forward thinking, very future oriented. And one of the things I've learned from, Japanese culture or wherever, lots of places, there's a reverence for like your place in your family's lineage and your kind of place in history. Like in Afghanistan is a great example of this. Like they could, these are some of the people we're working with were like illiterate, but could remember like 8 generations back, all the people in their family, what they did, like why they were brave, like everything was
Wow.
very sort of your place in this thing. And we don't have a lot of that in the US, but I think like it's quite powerful when you do have it, right? Like the
Yeah.
the sense of doing something on behalf of your family it's a little externalizing from just like this is for me, it's for something a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
That's kind of profound.
So how do you translate this to people that you're coaching, young athletes, your kids, people you work with?
Yeah. So I think the first point I made, maybe long-windedly, was like the clarity of vision. Like what is the
Yeah.
purpose? What are you doing? Like what are you trying to accomplish? And saying that out loud, repeating that all the time. That's a really cool. It's really easy for kids because they have like crazy memories because their brains are growing so fast. But like if they commit to a goal that they created and you help remind them of what that thing is, like those kids will be laser focused. And I think they get to see gains pretty quickly. I don't know. And I actually don't know if this is bad parenting or not, but I do it a lot, which is that like
Let's
we
leave it up to
kind of
the
have
audience here.
yeah, I kind of have a joke with our 3-year-old where like she thinks it's really funny, but she'll come and show me like a boo-boo and her hand and it's like
Yeah.
nothing or whatever. And I'm like, hey, I think this needs a good dose of suck it up. And I like kind of throw her hand down and she thinks it's really funny. But our kids, I think like what I'm trying to get at is the idea that like there can be setbacks and those actually can be good things because you're growing. And so they're not dwelling on the fact that they happen. They can communicate them and be like,
Yeah.
oh, this sucks. I was really bad today. I'm really sad. I got hit in the face, whatever. But you get to emphasize the part of that where the kid is growing. And then I think with kids in sports, it does make the overall experience more positive. If you got the good stuff's the good stuff and the bad stuff can be positive experiences and they're learning. I think that can be really useful.
It's so needed right now where there's such a like pandemic of fear of failure and all of that stuff.
Totally. Yeah. And I think like people that they admire talking about when they fail. I mean, I always think that's like the most cathartic thing to me as a kid was seeing somebody who I wanted to be just like. It was like the pitcher on Craig's team. And like that guy was admitting that he was nervous before a game or something. That was like really cool for me.
Yeah.
And I think people that they admire being real with kids goes a long way too.
We've hit on this a few times, but it was so helpful for me to put into some perspective when I was going through a hard time, thinking about you being deployed, obviously in a very dangerous situation. I had my worst year after the London Olympics where my identity was challenged and like going through some stuff. I was playing in Poland, the only English speaker. It was a tough go. And you were also deployed. And I remember, I think mom's listening, but she sent me an iPad for Christmas and she sent you a Seahawks sweatshirt.
Yeah.
Like,
T-shirt.
what is, yeah, t-shirt.
T-shirt is like a $7 t-shirt.
That's right. So we know who the favorite kid is. But my question is, you have been in, some pretty tough environments with the highest of consequence. What have you learned about yourself or a team performing under pressure? And then again, I'd like to tack on, how would you teach that to, say, a 15-year-old or a younger kid?
Okay. So I actually don't consider myself particularly good at this. So
Really?
That's my caveat. Yeah.
Is that because I had a better batting average in Little League, or what makes you think that?
It may be fair to talk about that on the basketball court. Courtney and I got into a fight at one point, and it reminds me of the scene from Sandlot where they're like, you play ball like a,
Yeah.
He's like, well, I had a better batting average in Little League. And my only comeback was, well, that's because you bunted all the time. And that was
Oh
like
my
the
God.
biggest fight we'd had. But
So good.
Pressure. Okay. So I guess I don't think I'm that good at it because I think it requires one major ingredient, which is preparation. Like I do have a very helpful thing that I think about a lot now, which is that you prepare for something until your nervousness turns into excitement, speech, whatever it is. And I get distracted and then, I'm like excitable. And so sometimes I'm not like maybe zeroing in and focusing on the most important thing at that moment, something that I have to really, really be conscious of.
Yeah.
But I think that's the number one way to reduce nerves is to just be over prepared. And most of the time that I'm nervous for things, honestly, speaking, I think you and I both like talking, in front of people, but when you're not prepared, it is not fun to talk in front of people. And when you're really prepared, it's genuinely exciting. Like that's a very easy example of that, but I find that it transcends lots of things. The other thing why I think I'm not always great at this is that reducing distractions is really important. And so I think there's times in my life when things are really consequential. I do think that I can kind of harness it and stay incredibly focused and be in the moment. But one of the biggest distractions in any moment is questioning whether or not you're going to succeed. Thinking about all the scenarios that are happening is an incredible way for you to get out of that moment and actually perform poorly under pressure. And so I think being aware of that doesn't prevent it entirely, but it certainly helps that is an unproductive thought to be sitting there ready to receive, the pivotal serve. And you're thinking about what would happen if. That's just not helping you stay in that moment. You got to be thinking about where that ball might come, what you're going to do, whatever. I'm out of my element talking about volleyball, but you get my point.
I like that. Just your ability to be where your feet are, be present.
Can I ask you a question? So
yeah,
I do remember that when you won the national championship and the team didn't lose any sets, and I was just sort of flabbergasted. I don't know that had ever happened, but you guys performed clearly under a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. And I remember you saying that your team didn't perform that much better. It's that everybody else performed worse. And then there's this old Derek Jeter quote about why did he perform so well? Because he just did what he did, but everybody else played worse. They let the pressure get to them. I mean, do you still think that's the case?
Yeah, I haven't thought about that in a while, back in 2005, but I do think there's this tendency to feel and even being at the Olympics, it's I'm here, you can make this moment feel so big. And when the teams that I were on that won the ultimate championship and also loved the experience, it was this we have worked so hard. There's zero question in our ability to do what we do. And running out in 2004, UW Washington, we lost in the semifinals. We got our ass kicked in 20 minutes. It was terrible. And we were so high and so excited. And so in 2005, I remember running out on the court and feeling that rush of oh my God, we're here. We're at the national championship. Oh my, the overwhelm. And then very quickly going, we do what we do. We just literally do what we do every single day, almost like a flatter emotional experience. And yet there's such a charge to it when you can land there. So I do think most people win championships by just expressing themselves versus, you make so many mistakes trying too hard to make the big play or whatever. Sorry, I'm geeking out on it. You talked about Hell Week, and I remember being shocked of knowing some of your buddies, and we partied together a little bit in California before Hell Week. And then I was oh, for sure, these guys that are, 6'4" and jacked, and they look like how I would think SEALs looked, they'll make it through for sure. And then a lot of it was smaller, skinnier guys that were just tough and, great in the water, etc. My long-winded question is, through screening people to be in this difficult environment, what did you learn about creating a team? And how could you translate that to coaches that are picking teams every year?
How to pick good teams. I think there's what we want to believe is true, and then there's what I believe is true. And what is true is that talent matters a lot. It matters a lot. You can have examples of incredibly successful Bad News Bears type teams that have these unbelievable coaches and amazing team-oriented players, but they're very rare. So I think it does start with the talent. Here's what I do believe is that the talent should never supersede the benefit you get from a team. And what you get from a team is that it sort of balances the individual peaks and troughs that a person feels in performance and motivation and all those other things. So you talk about toughness with kids, it's like put them around a bunch of other kids and have them all do this hard thing. Like that's the easiest way to do it. And that's what Buds is. Like I wouldn't have done 95% of those things if it was an instructor and me alone. But when I'm like running next to somebody and he gives me a little tap or gives me a look, and then I get to do that for somebody else, that is really profound. And so I think the team element of this can never be put behind the talent, but the talent's got to be there. Now, how do you foster that kind of like team side of it?
Yeah.
I think like what we did, like, here's what I don't think works. Like in the business setting, I think interviews are pretty flawed. Because you're only getting sort of somebody in like a unique environment. And what I learned through that process of, having lots of data on a lot of high performing people and seeing who performs well was that the number one indicator of success was past success. And so whichever thing you cared the most about, like if it was teamwork, then go talk to the person's teammates in the past. If it was leadership, go look at the results and talk to the people who were working with them above and below. Like, so you can really segment, like, what is the thing that you care about? And then go look in the person's past and try to dissect that. And so you can use an interview or a conversation to dig into what those things are. So, in my role now, like we don't have, at the time we had intelligence tests, we had personality tests, we had a decade of reviews, we had peer rankings, we had physical tests, we had everything we wanted. And so I got to kind of see, and I still think the things that are the highest indicators of team orientation are going to be your past performance within teams and your ratings from your teammates. So what we do in business, when you don't have those things, you've just got mostly interviews, a resume, and maybe a couple of references, is you've got to use your interview time to dig into the things that you care the most about and find evidence of those in a person's past. And so I just don't think you can't fake, like, there's this line of questioning that's like, what's something you did that was really hard? Why was it hard? What did you do? Like, what were your challenges? What were the things that you had to overcome? What ultimately was like the thing that resolved it? What was the right answer? Like, you can't fake those answers. You just have to tell sort of experientially what you did. And so that's a long-winded way of saying, like, figure out the things that you actually care the most about and then dig deep on those and look for past performance in them.
How did your background in sports growing up create your ability to like be a great teammate and step into those places and embody that?
One, I think being a bad teammate, I learned quickly like what that looks like.
When was that?
I don't know, throwing my helmet for 3 straight years in baseball or whatever it is.
True.
I mean, I think like you just make mistakes in sports, and the consequences, again, it's like, it's a laboratory, right? The consequences are not life-threatening. They're not that big. And so it's just an amazing opportunity to go get embarrassed and to like lose your temper when you probably shouldn't, and to like accuse your teammate of something and make them feel worse. And then like it sits with you for a couple of days. So like, I just like all those things that happen in sports, the reality of them. That's one of the things that I think you don't want to overcoach kids. You want to like let them actually kind of overreach. What you want to do is help them recover from those setbacks. Like I think what sports gave me was an opportunity to recover from setbacks over and over and over again. And it can be in the form of a loss, which means that I have to work harder. I have to motivate my teammates more, whatever that is. It can be in the form of like, you have, a mess up yourself, maybe you choke in a big moment, whatever it is. But like the role of a coach is to be there for the kid when they have that setback and then help them grow from it. When
you think about being with someone in that moment, what's your style? Like, let's say I just hypothetically blew the game. Or, I had a shot to shoot a free throw to tie it. I didn't hit it. Are you going, hey, this is part of it, we're going to get over it? Or do you kind of sit in the hard with them first? Like, how do you think about that?
So Mariano Rivera, the greatest closer of all time, he had the weirdest way of dealing with, here's what he would do. He would close a game, and if he won the game, he would go back to the locker room, shower, watch the tape, and then he'd go home. And he would like learn from it what he did, what he would do better. If he blew a save, he wouldn't touch it. He would like go home, see his kids, go to bed, wake up the next day. And if he felt like reviewing it, he would review it. And so like, that's such an unconventional way to think. Like, that's probably not how I would have done it.
Yeah.
But it made, the importance of him like visualizing the good reps and then unemotionally learning from the bad stuff was really important. And so the way I would present to a kid is like, you don't want to amplify the negative experience of losing by like digging into what happened right when it happened. Like let it get unemotional. Let the person go to bed. Help them deal with their emotions. It's just a game. It's okay, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
And then later on, you come back and you can reflect and see if there's something to learn from that. But like learning about Mariano really changes how I think about like that with kids when they've gone through something quite difficult.
It's a really cool frame.
Now, the flip side of this is that the best coaches, their only function is to unlock the potential of their players, their personal potential, their like performance potential, whatever it is. And so there is a time that if you know the kid well and you're not going to like crush her spirit, like there's a time and a place to like really say, stop, like push and like really push the kid.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a balance between those two worlds of like letting a setback kind of reset and come in. And there may be a time when you say, stop, get back in the field. Like, let's keep going.
Yeah. That's like the art of coaching, I feel like. Cause I remember so much of my fire was this, like, I think because I let myself feel the hard stuff. And I remember losing in state basketball, and Craig, the sensei brother.
Yeah.
I was sitting there dramatically, like my hoodie up, headphones in, crying at the, in the bleachers, and everyone was like, hey, next year. And everyone's being nice. And Craig walked towards me and I'm like, oh, he's going to give me some like motivational, tell me it was fine. And he sat down next to me and goes, I want you to never forget this feeling. And I was like, damn. And I laugh about it now, but actually it's a beautiful gift of like, it's okay to feel like it's shitty. And when you commit to something, it's hard to commit. And it's okay that you're like devastated. And now what do we do? Obviously there's a time and a place for it, but.
Cue the Eminem music and make it like an Instagram short.
Oh, I did. But, yeah. You're working out to, jock jams in the
Never
garage.
Forget this.
Such a nerd. All right. You taught leadership at the Naval Academy for 2 years, correct?
That's right.
Okay. I know you have some feelings on this question, but I'm thinking of all of these coaches who ask me a lot, hey, how do we foster leadership? How do we foster leaders? How do we choose captains? And then also parents like wanting to help their athlete or kid embody who they are and take up space and bring others along. So how do you think about teaching people to lead well?
My feelings on, I just find it a difficult topic to talk about in broad terms. Because sometimes so much of it is like where you got to meet the audience where they are, myself, you, whatever. Like I remember one of my worst ever speeches was like talking to a high school baseball team. And like, I went in with like a list of like pretty high level leadership stuff, like nuanced things. Cause we were talking about it all the time. And these kids were at an age where they needed to be told like, set a good example. Like, don't berate your teammates, like build them up.
Yeah.
Like, whatever it is, like work harder than everybody else, be there before them and be the one doing the job, sweep the locker room kind of thing. And like that is at it. So sometimes leadership is just such a huge topic, that it's almost like commenting on history. Like, okay, well, tell me which part of it you want to talk about. But I think I think the part that, you're getting at is kind of how do you teach that in kids and how do you explore that in kids? And so what I learned teaching it at the Naval Academy was the importance of authenticity and like individualizing a person's style. So, okay, rewind a little bit. So I went to college there. I went to university or whatever it is, academy. And your freshman year, you're like following all the rules. You shave your head. It's like super weird. You do all these customs to basically say like, you're not special. And then your second year, all of a sudden you're kind of special and you get a little swagger to you. And then you like, but the first year, what you're learning is like the basics of leadership and sociology, like personality tests, like we're all a little bit different and how do groups organize and things like that. The second year, you're actually learning a bit more about like ethics and the importance that a leader has like an ethical framework and the importance that they, set a framework for the people on their team. But then your junior year, you're like thrown into the fire. So you kind of have that swagger your sophomore year, and then your junior, it's like, now go lead the freshmen. That's your job. Like that summer, you're in charge of them. And that's where you realize like, oh, this is actually way harder. And then your senior year is sort of supervising them. And so it's this progression to then be a naval officer, at which point you're, leading people under high consequences.
Yeah.
So I learned a couple things through that process about kind of learning. The first is, the kind of like the, individualization part of it. And I don't mean like I have 5 people on my team. I need to know all their personalities. That's true. But you got to know yourself before you can do any of that stuff, because that's where you can recognize which strengths to amplify and which things
Yeah.
to account for with other people. And so there was always a process of like teaching them about themselves, having them do a ton of reflection, and that really worked. So I remember my junior year sort of thinking I had the right playbook, and I led this training program through the summer. And at the end of the summer, all the students like did skits, and I missed the day, which I regret. I was with our family actually in North Carolina, but I missed it. But they all made fun of me for like an hour straight, and it was,
Oh my
and like
God.
apparently it was really funny. But because I was sort of taking on this persona that was like, I'm like a tough guy and hard, and I'm going to like berate you, and then in private I'll like boost you up. I thought that was sort of like, I saw a leader do that, and he was like the guy that I revered. You know, he really boosted me, but in public, and that wasn't me. And so it was
Yeah.
this like realization that doesn't work. And so I think with kids, you help them figure out who they are, what they're naturally better at early in their life, and then they get to practice it and make all
Yeah.
these mistakes as they go through. So the other piece of this is,
Great.
sorry, I'm talking
No,
so
it's
much
great.
on this one, but I think it can be summarized. I'll butcher the story, but there's a guy named Admiral McCraven who was a SEAL admiral, and he was the chancellor at University of Texas, and he gave the famous like "Make Your Bed" speech
Oh yeah.
at their commencement. So he tells the story. He told the story at the Naval Academy where he said, you know, you're going to, as leaders, like your job is to do the right thing and to help groups do the right thing. And like that's why we're giving you a commission. That's why we're trusting you with like lethal weapons going into other places around the world, is because we have built into you what we believe to be like sound ethical frameworks.
Yeah.
And so you spent 4 years practicing these things, and you're going to graduate, and you're going to know exactly what the right thing to do is. And then you're going to be a Marine, and you're going to be in your first platoon, and you'll be sitting there talking to your team, and there's going to be a gunnery sergeant that steps up, and he says a couple offensive words, and he starts like berating some of the guys, and he says a couple things that you didn't agree to, and you're just going to sit back and you're going to let him do it, and you're not even going to step in. And then you're going to go back to the office with him, and you're going to think about saying something, but you're not going to. And then you're going to go home, and you're going to lie down, and you're going to feel sick to your stomach because you didn't do what you've been trained to do for 4 years. And you're going to wake up the next day, and you're still going to feel sick to your stomach. Then you're going to get better, and you'll learn from it, and you'll grow, and hopefully you don't make the same mistake. And then 3 months are going to go by, and he repeats the same story. And he's like, this is going to happen to you for the rest of your life as a leader.
Damn.
You're going to make mistakes. You're going to feel sick to your stomach. You're going to wake up, you're going to feel sick, and then the next day you'll eventually feel better and you'll learn from it. The day that you wake up and you don't feel sick to your stomach, that's the day that you need to get out of the military. And
Wow.
like, it was such a cool framing for an institution that has like very high standards. And if you lie, you're kicked out, and you make all these mistakes, but we're all human. But it framed like the idea of a leader is that you're just constantly trying to improve the performance and the opportunities for the people that are on your team. And you're going to fall short, but like that's the quest. That's what being a leader is.
What I love that also because kids, coaches, we're also afraid of saying the wrong thing. And I do think taking up space like that, leading, being the one to take a chance, unless you really blow that a few times, you're not going to learn your voice. You're not going to learn those moments of like, oh, that's not the right one. And, those moments where you say something and right away you're like, oh shit, that was bad.
It's the wrong thing.
Like that one back. Yeah. So that's a really cool frame. I want to be respectful of your time. This has been so enjoyable, and thank you again. But you already answered this for coaches, which we usually end on, but I want to ask you, in all of your life experience, your kids are going to go through high school. I know you do a lot of stuff with athletes at every age. What do you hope most for every high school athlete?
So I'll tell a story about me, and then I hope that every high school athlete has something like this.
Great.
I was like I was joking earlier about beating you. Like, you are an extremely talented athlete from a very young age. I was like a fine athlete, but I was never like that exceptional. And I always knew that. And, but I was like, when I was young, I would win backyard football games and was good in Little League and those sorts of things. Then I sort of took this dip in my life where, I went through puberty. I wasn't like quite as big, and I just like was like a tear down. I tried as hard and I thought I had it, but I just like wasn't as confident. I wasn't as good at stuff. And particularly football. And I almost quit football because I just was like, I'm like the backup, and this is weird. And there was a coach that came in, and he's a family friend, and he said, no, go play this year. And he convinced me to do that. But then fast forward, and I was like working with the backup team, and I was like playing Skelly, which is this essentially like you play a passing offense against the starting defense. And I started to find success. And there was this coach that you and I had named Coach Larrabee.
Oh, Larrabee, the
and
best.
Yeah, so Don Bartel and Coach Larrabee. So Larrabee sort of saw this and was like, "You're really good at this. Like, let's change positions and we'll just do this all day." And so we built this kind of like, he kind of gave me my swagger back by like, he would bring me in, he would talk crap to the defense, the starting defense, and then we would just like crush him. He was the quarterback and I was the receiver. It's like the most fun I'd ever had in like a sport. And he just built this like thing with me where all of a sudden I was like now performing kind of out of body. Like, oh, like if I play like I did as a kid, like I can catch these balls. Like I can do this instead of this kid that's sort of in a shell.
Yeah.
So that was one moment. And then there was another one where I actually got to play. I was like, now playing receiver and playing in varsity, and it was really cool. And they threw me a screen pass, and I remember like running down the sidelines and then like stepping out of bounds before I got hit, which is what any common sense person would do. And I remember like Bartel grabs me and he's like, "We're going to throw you the same pass." He's like, "Run through that guy. Don't ever do that again." I was like, "Okay." So I go back out there. They throw me the ball. And like the guy came to tackle me in the same spot, and I like ran through him.
Let's go.
And I wasn't like this crazy, aggressive hitter, but that was like a transformational moment in my life. Like truly, not that I became this like super aggressive person, but I realized like in both of those times, all it took was somebody like deliberately, like in a very specific way, not some generalized way, saying, "You're here, you can be there, like go do that." And then when you do it, it gives you like a sense of confidence. And it sounds, I'm probably overstating it to say that those moments like made me who I am, but I certainly think a collection of those moments in high school sports, they allow kids to grow up in a way where they have a ton more confidence and a ton more resilience.
Yeah.
So I wish that for high school players.
It's one of the most beautiful things of coaching. And I think the hard ones is that you never know when those little moments like have such a deep impact years later. So that's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining. I want to keep asking you questions, and I love you so much. You make me want to be better all the time, and this is another example. So appreciate you taking the time.
Proud of you. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in to Beyond the Court, and special thanks to our guest and my brother, Trevor Thompson, for joining us today. Make sure to hit the subscribe button below so you don't miss the next episode where we chat with Shannon Smolinski, the club director of the number 10 nationally ranked club, Premier Nebraska. Not only are they one of the best clubs in the country, Shannon and her team have created an amazing culture where it's just fun to come in and have the tools and resources and support to really pursue your best as an athlete. It's an incredible gym to walk into, and you won't want to miss this conversation. To learn more about League One Volleyball, follow us on Instagram at LOVB. And in the meantime, work hard, have fun, and keep on spreading the love out there. All right, we'll see you next time.